Thursday, everybody. It is backdrop day. For some of us, it's been backdrop week. um, but we are working on Backdrop CMS, which is a content management system for small to medium-sized businesses and nonprofits or people who are trying to do awesome things on a budget. We are working on Backdrop because we believe that there's a cost that comes with change, and Drupal 8 is changing too much for the existing Drupal audience. So we are trying to create a content management system with Drupal 8 comparable features on an architecture that is more similar to Drupal 7 to ease upgrading and make things familiar for people who already know how to use Drupal. Through that process, we're going to be fixing as many bugs as we can, as well as simplifying existing systems and adding new features, where doing those last two things doesn't require changing the API very much from how Drupal 7 had it before. We're aiming to have Backdrop released this summer. We're thinking July 2014, with regular releases on a recurring basis, maybe 4 months or so. Every 4 months or so, we'll be able to add new features. Right now, we're working on a couple of different things. We're doing backports from Drupal 8, selecting individual ones that we think are going to be really important for Backdrop, and of those we've got a couple. All of the CSS improvements we're working on, all of the JavaScript improvements, all of the HTML5 stuff, trying to make the front end as clean and tidy as we can for people working on Backdrop, as well as a whole bunch of other minor improvements to systems that hopefully will improve developer experience as well. We're also working on getting all of the Drupal 7 cross-ports in. So that's every commit that has been made to Drupal 7 since it has been getting more commits as time goes on. We're including those in Backdrop as well. In terms of new projects, we've been working on adding blocks and layouts to Backdrop, so that means a better way of placing content on the page. We've been putting views in core, which is getting listing management tools so that you can generate lists of anything, and config management so that you can separate the configuration from the content so that they won't both be shoved in the database and hard to separate for deployment and other good maintenance reasons. Minor projects we've been working on are separating the identity of Backdrop from Drupal. And we've got a bunch of big updates on this. For starters, we are replacing the word Drupal everywhere in Backdrop with the word Backdrop. That includes functions that have the word Drupal in them are now going to be starting with Backdrop. Variables that have the word Drupal in them, we've dropped the word Drupal, so it's just the variable name. And we've got a whole bunch of other things that are getting updated too, like documentation and other stuff like that. So there's a patch in the queue. I'm about 75% of the way through reviewing it. It's a doozy, but it looks really good so far. There haven't been anything where I thought, maybe we shouldn't replace that, or anything that we have missed. We will, of course, be able to come back and re-clean as necessary, because as we're moving in some of these patches, they'll be putting Drupals back in. So we've got to do a follow-up to make sure we get them all out before we release, but I think it's a really, really good start. Let's see, we've also reset the update numbers, I think, since last week, so that now when you run an update from Backdrop, you're not going to be running 8,000 updates, you're going to be running 1,000 updates, which I think makes a lot of sense. And the most exciting thing is that this week we got our official Backdrop logo from our designer, Darius, who did an amazing job. Apparently he was pretty nervous about it, but he showed it to us and just knocked it completely out of the park. Nate and I both love it. So right now we're waiting for design files from him so we can go ahead and put them up and show you guys what it looks like. But it's not a drop, just to kind of give you a little hint. So it looks really great. We've also got a font face that we're going to be using for the website and for all of our graphic stuff too, which is open source font. So we're really excited about the way everything looks, and we're looking forward to getting some of that going so we can start having an identity online, which I think will be amazing. We've got our admin theme style guide kind of on the same note there underway, and we need to have a check-in with Julia and see how she's going on that. But now that we have a logo and fonts and a color palette, I think it would be really great to kind of include some of those in our admin theme too. We just have to make sure that our admin theme doesn't look exactly like our public-facing website when we're done, because that ends up being confusing to people. But we are starting to have our own identity, which I think is super exciting. And then we're also, yeah, I mean, we've got some design tasks like not only the admin theme, but also the installer and some other things that will start to make things look more backdrop-y and less Drupal-y. Other user experience improvements. Last week we told you we got admin menu committed to core. We've had a couple of minor changes to it since then, introduced and then fixed a bug yesterday, which is great. There's a couple of other little things that need tweaking, but I think overall it's a huge improvement. I think it makes managing a site much easier right out of the box without having to go install a module to help you manage, just navigate around, which is good. We've got some other stuff going in. We've got terminology updates. There's a issue where we're working on that. I think having the admin menu in core is going to help that a little bit, because we don't need to, for example, remove the word modules from the menu. If we have a category called functionality, then we can have a top-level item in there called modules, and so we can kind of train people that if you need functionality, you add modules just by having those words in the menu. So I think that there's a lot of hope for making our terminology a little better just by having an admin menu in there. It gives us more places to put words to help people figure out what they need to do, which I think is great. We've also got rich text editors next on the list for user experience improvements, which is great. And for the last few weeks, we've been making a ton of progress on theme system improvements. We've got everybody working on CSS cleanup, consolidation of template files, removing theme functions that don't make sense, cleaning up all of our JavaScript to make the syntax look better. So I think that the front end is finally starting to get some attention, which makes me really happy because we've kind of been ignoring it for the last 6 months. So hopefully it'll start to look and feel more like a system that front-enders will be looking forward to using, as well as Drupal developer backend types. So I'm super excited about that too. We have no updates from the PMC this week, other than the fact that we have a logo. We love it, and we'll get it so we can show it to you soon. I'd imagine the first places we're going to use it are probably on the backdrop website favicon, because that'll be really easy to put in. And then I was thinking about updating all of our like GitHub profile pages and such, so that rather than having the drop that we're using now, our little open source drop, we start to kind of set our identity on GitHub, and then we'll have a slower process of getting that brand onto our own website, because we need to actually design the website. But we'll start getting some of these elements in some places so people can see what they look like. And then let's see, other things we're working on. An API site. I'm happy to announce that I made some commits to our API repository this week. We don't actually have a website up yet, but we do have Drupal and a bunch of contributed modules that are ready to go, which is good. So all we need to do is put that up on a server, and then I was going to give Luke a login and let him kind of go to town on setting up some content types for change notices and that sort of thing. So I think we're getting closer on that, which is really good. Then we have update server. We still need to figure out how we're going to make that work for contrib. We need an official GitHub service, which will also make our contrib work a little better. And backdrop primary website, we need a new redesign with logo, as well as we need to add our module and theme section and a showcase section, as well as what we have there now. Sprints is Thursday. We're going to be working on backdrop this afternoon. Anyone else who wants to work with us this afternoon, that's great. We've also been kind of working on backdrop Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday for the last few weeks. We'll probably do the same next Tuesday as well. We've got everyone working on backdrop, and then Thursdays. We'll probably see kind of a ramp up between now and launch as we're trying to get all of these little improvements in to kind of make a big splash. And then DrupalCorn coming up in July, and Twin Cities Drupal Camp in August. We'll also be doing in-person sprints if anyone wants to come to either of those events. They're both going to be a lot of fun. Our article in Drupal Watchdog is out, which is kind of exciting. Let me see if I can grab one. So here is the latest version of Drupal Watchdog. It's all about Drupal 8. And then in the very back, after you read 1,800 articles about Drupal 8, there is an article about backdrop. Yay!
Woo!
So I think that it's not quite the presentation I wanted. I was kind of expecting there would be like one major article on Drupal 8 and then one major article on Backdrop and then everything else would just be peripheral. But apparently, like, there's a lot that needs to be said about Drupal 8. No surprise there. So that basically the entire magazine is Drupal 8. So I guess I'm glad we're in there at all, which is good. But yeah, it's kind of like after you've read everything there is to read about Drupal, if you're worried about it, here's an article about an alternative, which I think is good. It's at least in there, and I think that we said a lot of things that needed to be said. So it's a good article. Read it when you get the magazine at DrupalCon. If you're going to DrupalCon, they're handing them out. So that's exciting. Let's see. Anything else? Nate, I know you did a ton of work on the renaming patch, and you've been reviewing pull requests like crazy this week. You want to add anything in particular?
Gosh, geez, yeah, we've been making a ton of progress. Like, there's been all kinds of activity in the queue. Thanks to our drop-durants who are on this phone call. You guys want to say hi? Adam, Matthias, and Paul.
Hi. Hello.
So, for the past couple of weeks, we've had these guys doing an internship, rocking through the Backdrop issue queue, learning how to GitHub and learning how to Drupal, learning how to Backdrop. It's been great, and making all kinds of great ports and movement forward. Let's see. I guess on the topic of thanking people, Behind the Page has been actively working on getting context module up to date, moving it into CMI. He was one of the original authors of the contact module, actually. So he's back in our queue, working on moving contact module into a fully ported version for Backdrop, which we're really excited about.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, the renaming has probably been the primary thing that I've been working on this week, or the past couple of weeks. And so a couple of weeks ago, we got we started identifying Backdrop separately, so it has its own constants to identify its version number, so it's 1.x. And now we've got the update numbers reset, so they're 1,000 instead of 8,000, but they'll still move forward from a Drupal 7 site, so even though Drupal 7 sites are in the 7,000 range, and Backdrop will be in the 1,000 range, it will loop around and pick up from where Drupal 7 left off. And let's see. Oh, we also, something else that's kind of big this week that we don't have on the agenda, we moved settings.php and the files directory into the root of the Backdrop install by default now. So that means that when you install a new Backdrop website, the modules are in the root, the themes are in the root, settings.php is in the root, and files are in the root. And the sites directory is now entirely optional. So inside of the sites directory now, there's just a README and the sites.php file. But if you want to, you can actually delete the sites directory entirely now, because that's like the multi-site functionality still exists and it's still there. It's just that it's kind of a, it's an add-on feature that instead of being forced right up in your face, it's just kind of there if you want to have a multi-site install. But since most Drupal sites are not multi-site, now all of that stuff that you access regularly is right there in the root where it's accessible instead of being buried inside of sites default or sites all.
Yay! And tell them about the database connection string.
Oh yeah, yeah, and we simplified settings.php so that right at the top of settings.php there's just the database connection string on like line 8 or something like that. That is just I guess it's line 14, but it's still an improvement.
Still at the top. You can still read it.
It's at the top, above the fold, as you would say. And you can use a simplified database connection string. And if you have the database connection string, then you can skip a whole bunch of steps in the install, and you don't even need to write to settings.php. And there's a bunch of great things that happen.
There's no more chmodding of your directories that locks you out of stuff.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's a big improvement for people doing localhost development, especially like MAMP or WAMP users, where permissions were always getting in the way. Let's see. And there was one other thing. Oh yeah. The renaming issue, where we're renaming Drupal to Backdrop throughout the code in all constants, in all classes, in all interfaces, in all functions, in all documentation, and in all strings. So it's a massive, massive update that replaces. It touches on just about everything. The downside of that is that it's going to make porting our patches more difficult because there's going to be a lot more things that are different. The good thing being that like once the separation happens, like we'll actually be able to identify ourselves as a project that has a long-term future rather than this kind of schizophrenic, like just temporary thing for holding over Drupal 7 websites. So I think it's a really positive thing, and I'm really glad that that issue is all ready to go.
And there's a backwards compatibility layer.
Oh yeah, and there's a backwards compatibility layer that's on by default. So so porting modules to Backdrop, we still want to make it as easy as possible. I think behind the page, the contacts module guy noted that he could convert. Let's see, I can't remember which module it was. Oh, he converted Coder module. He converted Coder module in a couple of minutes, and he was just like, "Wow, this is great! Like, it's still so similar." And that's exactly what we're going for. The porting job should be like, yeah, it should be a weekend job at max, rather than like a 9-month project or a year-long project, which is what we're seeing in some of Drupal 8 modules. So I think we're doing really good. And even though we're renaming everything, the conversion process should still be really trivial. It's like if you see the word Drupal, replace it with Backdrop, and that's pretty much universal.
Yay!
Well, cool. Yeah, we're just gonna keep on rolling. There's sprints after this call, and I don't have anything else.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions or updates or anything? Nope.
I have one. I guess this might be too long for maybe this call, but can you refresh my memory on the Backdrop backwards compatibility with Internet Explorer and jQuery? Like, are we using 1.8, 2.x, 3 support, IE8, IE10?
Yeah. So the version of jQuery that we're using, if I'm not mistaken, is 1.11, which is the newest version of jQuery on the 1.x branch, which still includes IE, the legacy support, so IE 6 through 8. But in terms of our planned browser support, currently we're still supporting Internet Explorer 8, but not 6 or 7.
Okay.
So
there's an issue in the queue that talks about whether we should drop support for IE or not, but right now we are supporting it. We're probably going to support it for the 1.x release and drop it for 2.x. That's kind of our thinking right now.
Okay, thanks.
yeah, I think that's all that we've got on that.
All right. Well, I've got a lot more pull requests to review, so I guess we're going to go back to work. But thanks you all for joining, and we'll see you next week.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thanks.